Large language model. What is that? In this video, I want to cover what a language model is, what a large language model is, some recent history of language models, as well as the purpose of a language model. And of course, I'll be doing this from a philosophical lens. Let's get started. First, the basics. A language model is a computational algorithm. So it's something that a programmer would be able to create. Once you have a large language model, somebody would be able to use it to generate new context without knowing anything about how to code or how to program. LLMs are also a type of generative AI. That means that it's a kind of AI, the kind of AI that's a generative AI. So let's break down this. Artificial intelligence, that is what AI stands for. When you're saying artificial intelligence, you're saying that something is being called intelligent. It can think or reason or infer or calculate or categorize or conclude things. And it's artificially doing that. So basically, artificial intelligence is when you have something like a computer program that's mimicking what human beings can do or intelligent beings can do. So that's what AI is. What is generative AI? It's the kind of algorithm that is able to mimic human intelligence that can create new information. Not just remember, meaning storing facts, but also to take those facts and to create something new or original or novel. A large language model is a type of generative AI. That means that these models, once they're programmed, will be able to create new images, new audio, new text, new poems, new scripts. So when we say it's a type of generative AI, that tells you that it's also a type of AI. LLMs are also based on deep learning. That's the kind of machine learning that involves neural networks. So when we say that it's based on deep learning, we know that it's also involving machine learning. The computer program, the algorithm, is literally able to do the same thing as human babies. It can learn information and then use that information in new ways that it hasn't been programmed itself to do. Like when a young person realizes that they can tell a joke that they haven't heard. They can make one up. Maybe it won't be good, but what they're doing is generating content based on all the content that they've learned before. Large language models are able to do that. And LLMs also use transformer neural networks. Now, that wasn't always the case. In 1966, MIT put out one of the first natural language models. Since then, we've learned a lot about what language models can do. In 1966, the programmers were trying to figure out how they can get a program to play checkers. But since 2017, we have been able to do a lot more than make computers play games. The LLMs that are called modern LLMs are the ones that use transformer neural networks. And so when someone's talking to you about a modern or contemporary LLM, they usually mean one that was programmed in 2017 or moving forward. They usually mean the kind that uses a transformer neural network. ChatGPT, for example, the T in ChatGPT is transformer. Today's large language models use transformer neural networks. What is that? Basically, just like in your human brain, you have different neurons that fire and connect to other neurons. And the more neural connections you have, the better your brain is functioning, the more information you can retain and access later. Artificial intelligence has been made to mimic that same thing your brain is doing, especially in the frontal cortex. In the artificial intelligent generative systems that are being programmed now, basically what's happening is that the program is being trained on data. That data is like information about relationships, and that's basically called a parameter. The parameter is the memory of the machine after it's been trained. So imagine OpenAI, which is the creator company of ChatGPT, all of them, the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, downloads every single thing off of the internet. The computer program is trained on how to predict the next word based on all of the natural language that's already on the internet. And then that information gets stored as a parameter. And the more parameters, the more neural networks there are, the more relationships between information that there are pre-trained into the transformer, the better the content will be that the transformer generates. There's more than one kind of language model, and depending on the kind of language model you're using and the purpose for which you're using that language model, you might need to use different prompts. There are different ways to prompt ChatGPT or BERT or any of the kinds of transformers you might be using these days. A zero-shot prompt is less complicated, less informative to the large language model than a few-shot prompt or a chain of thought prompt. The more complicated, the more context, the more detailed your prompt is that you design, the better the artificial intelligent algorithm will be able to predict what you think is the right kind of answer to your question. And a prompt design is not the same as a prompt engineering, so that is something that you might want to look more into. ChatGPT, for example, one of the many examples, is a computational algorithm that takes natural language and then predicts new ideas. It can give you an answer to a question that you have. And how does it do that? How does it create text? Well, companies like AI have downloaded everything on the internet, and the computer has been trained on that information. So when you start to ask it a question, it can find in its memory, through those parameters, through those relationships between words and concepts that are mapped in its memory, it can find what you're looking for. And then it can predict new things. It can even generate information that it's never been trained to do, just like a human being. It's able to create not just words, but also images. And more so, other than generating new information, it can take your information and generate new information by way of reducing it, by way of taking a super long essay, for example, and then putting it down to, say, 500 words. And this is why professors are very worried, because you could paste a whole 5-page essay into one of these artificial intelligent programs and then say, by prompting it, to decode for all of the key pieces of information and summarize the 5-page essay into 500 words. And it would be able to do that. You can also use large language models to analyze text for the language that it's using, for the sentiment that the author seems to have, for the kind of information that it has. Now, here's one thing that the large language models will not be able to do, and they will not be able to tell you if the text is accurate. In fact, large language models, because they're only giving you an output that's based on their input, cannot guarantee that what they are generating is true or beneficial. ChatGPT and BERT and all these other large language models, at least the ones that are in 2023 as I'm making this video, are also able to categorize. They are also able, if they've been trained on different languages, to translate from one language to another. You can, for example, go on to AI's website and go on to OpenAI's website and go to ChatGPT 3 or 4 or 5, whatever is being offered to the public now, and say, here is an essay that I'd like for you to translate into English, and make sure to continue using all of the same meanings from the original language. Now that is some really good prompt design. Remember to give the AI as much context as possible, like what tone should it use, how much information would be relevant, how many words do you want it to postulate.